Good morning, everyone. We are starting the second day of our conference, and Mr. Artyom Silkin is today with us. Good morning, dear friends, dear colleagues. Please accept my apologies because yesterday I was not present, and yesterday I was in St. Petersburg at the event of the Cultural Forum, which is now called differently. Well, it's kind of an unofficial cultural forum, but I had to go there because there was an event with colleagues from ICOM, International ICOM, because Kazan is applying as a candidate to host the General Conference of ICOM in 2025. So with the advertising means I had to go there, and in order to promote Kazan so that the conference is here. So I have heard the feedback that everything is going well here at the conference, and I now give the floor to Natalia. So today we are starting our conference from the online report because yesterday from Ufa our colleagues were unable to get properly connected. So the head of the archaeology of the National Museum of the Republic of Tatarstan, museum with a presentation of wooden pavements of the medieval settlement of Ufa, 2 attribution, dating, experience and problems in the field of conservation and creating a museum space. We are waiting for them to connect.
Ждать не будем. Хорошо. Тогда мы сначала. Да, хорошо. Тогда
They're not connected, then we're going to go with the next report. Now, Sergei Alkin, candidate of Historical Sciences, senior researcher of the Institute of Archaeology and Ethnography of the Siberian branch in Novosibirsk, and he's going to tell us on the wood in the archaeology of southeastern Zabaikal and Upper Amur region at the boundary between the first and the second millennium. So when I have seen Sviazhsk, I thought, well, I really need to go. I really need to go because my predecessors, they lived here, and the topic that we deal with in Baikal, I really need to come here and to get to know how to work with it. Because we at the Far East, the wood is not preserved there. In the best case, we work with coal, and we work with a very harsh methods, so to say. So yesterday I had experienced loads of insights in terms of how we need to work. Just trying to. As far as I understand, that during this conference, for the years of Kazakhstan, are the most eastern representative of the Archaeological Society, and we really work at the Far East. And this is the map of Zabaikal region, former Chita district. At the Shilka River there is a district of our research, and we are purely archaeological because there are not that many results on working with wood, and I do hope that they will add in the future because of the knowledge that I gained. In the Far East, well, the wood is not preserved there. And the only place where it is preserved out of the regions, the material of which that I take, South Korea, and in Korea we do research in this district of the Shilka River, and which is one of the rivers that starts Amur, and that is the region where various ethnicities were formed. Early Tungusan Manchurians from our and from the Chinese side, they came, have decided to migrate towards west. There's a little bit of information on the archaeology that we have there, and I'd like to repeat by saying in the wood, mainly it is coal. The wooden structures of residential and fortresses at the towns of Shilkinskaya system. Those settlements are known since the beginning of the 20th century, but the first archaeological research was done in 1954 by Alexei Okladnikov, and the first settlement that was excavated. It is there that there's a tradition of the house building that was widely known in Middle Amur, for us it is important. So this is the first Tungusan Manchurians, and for us it's important from where they come from. So coming to the new territory, archaeological, this is the culture, Mohe culture. They didn't come to the empty lands, they come to the Mongolian lands where resided Mongolian entity. They were not very welcomed, and also from the forest there was a tradition to build fortresses, both on the plain lands. This is the most beautiful spots. We were not digging, they are very difficult to access it, and there are some options of fortification units in that place. The main excavations are performed Ust-Chornaya settlement, so it's the largest settlement, about 100 excavations. So for 6 field seasons we have dug out 10 settlements, the part of the fortification system and the residues of the signaling system that we have found. With regards to the fortification, we can see that there are 2 rows here, and when we came there we were not thinking about digging of fortifications. No one is digging the fortifications because the field season is extremely short and it's clear that there will not be many findings. But in 2009 I had a bit of time at the end of the season and I have decided a trench. So we did it. How? They were formed, and we found that's the wood that was preserved in that region. The wood is around 1,000 years. So in the first place, my students have decided that it was left by geologists, and that wooden splint, and this object, Vadim Pavlovich Melnikov have studied it. The length of it is 42 centimeters, diameter is 22 centimeters. It's a bit thicker in the medial part. It's a round cross section made from. Over there are specific marks marks of the well cut. Cut off branches.
Значит, мастер на третий затратил 2 удара, нанося их остро точным лезвием под углом 15-20 градусов к стволу. Как, почему сохранился этот предмет?
So why
это грунт, который был...
it is in such a good condition? Because that was the soil.
Там такой суглинок и щебенка.
This was small gravel and clay. In the soil, there were unique conditions and it was well preserved. It was put in place once, so it was clear that this is a different year, but pretty much the same situation. There was a pole. And we were digging. We have spent a month for digging out these parts of the fortifications with the orange lines. We came out that this is the remains of the so this is a wattle. And we didn't find any other fortifications except for the 2 boards, because there were no. But the students were very upset. There were no findings, but we were quite happy because after us, you know that in the Amur region, the fortification was. But they don't have any wood in the Amur region, and the rest as the surface after the completion of works. The other example of archaeological wood out of the unique fortifications, these are signal fires to give information to the other settlements. And these are the base poles. We found them with our friends. One we came out of a sudden Paleolithic, the other one we have calculated. Because we asked the military people where it might be installed, and they said straight away. And this is the settlement. I'm quite limited with time. Here it is clear. Before Mahe came to this territory, there was nothing like that. So the nomads, a Mongolian know. And these are not nomads because this is a dugout hut or mud hut with enclosed, and that's the internal architecture. There are many of wood. They're of medieval age, early medieval ages. These are the remains of the bearing structure, beds and shelves inside. Preservation is good, but this is all coal. And for the analysis, we try to take the bark of the trees, quite an amount of birch bark. Here is the element of structures, and I'd like to show you now. There's a unique example of the house or the hut And I know the publications on Mackay from northeastern China. And Vladimir Pavlovich Mulnikov, when he saw this plant, he says, this is something like a parquet. This is something, well, this is flooring. Here, mainly birch and larch. And there is also black birch. It's not that even as the white birch, but they used it in construction as well. So this is a pavement of the flooring. And all of the findings are underneath the beds. Unfortunately, there are no wooden items, and I think that is because here, in the mountainous settlements, that where people lived, they lived in winter. All clean. Everything is very clean. So when the huts, when they were burning, and they were burning naturally, these wood fires, forest fires. There's also an interesting, unique structure of a stove surrounded by wood, various options of adjoining of beds aligning the walls of the hut in the corners. Or here from the... There's no birch bark under the stoves. These are the botanical finds. The specialists on what this magnificent church is awaiting. It's going to be the first border with China. The church is in a terrible state, but in comparison to other churches of the Zabaikal region, it's in a good state actually. And I'd like to complete here by saying that, well, yesterday in my head I had certain protocols of how we need to act in this situation if we are quite lucky and we'll find the true wood. I do hope that we will find it. This year we have found the settlement that we were looking for years, known by publications at the beginning of 20th century. There was no one there, no expeditions. And I really hope for that settlement, really, because just opposite it there is a place of the first Russian Kirbichansk fortress. So there's the first Cossack post. And now I'm thinking that, of course, with further works, we have to share with more attention our coals that we find. And now we have started cooperating with Maya Sitova, with Filatova. We have given her the samples, and now I know where the specialists work. Before we were communicating on wood with the specialists from the University of Cultural Heritage in Puerto, in South Korea, the biggest center to prepare specialists to conservation and restoration of the wood. Maybe you have met with them or you have cooperation with them, I really do not know. And the last one was also burial mounds, and it is clear with burials. And for many years we have worked Troitsky burial ground. The only thing that we were preserving, we didn't know how to preserve, is the birch bark. Not just the birch bark, that quite many of them, but there are in Machai burial mounds birch bark ornamented. And I'm thinking that, have a look at what stage is the birch bark is there, that is stored, and we will request your assistance on working with birch bark. Well, thank you so much. So, come to us, to Shilka. Great and beautiful spots. Thank you so much for taking us to Zabaikali region. Well, if everything is that clear, maybe they would put the settlement on fire themselves when leaving it, because when in the state of war. So from Amur, 6th to 8th, 7th pre-AD, they're all burned. The story there, and now they tell us that, there are forests on fires. Forests, they have fires by themselves, and they have fires at all times. So the forest fires, they are the natural ones. They are burnt at the bottom. So the process of the archaeologization, it lasted for quite a while, and we can see that the fire, for many times it was discussed at the Far Eastern monuments. The thing is here that the wood that is there in the burial grounds is different. They are pre-Tungus people, Mahes, ethnographic Tungus. They were not burying people. And Mahes is the early stage of the development of the Tungus Manjur culture. They had the secondary burial before they came to the air. So the body left there, it was skeletized. The whole hole was dug in the ground, and they would bury the residues of people over there. And the burial field that we worked at was 8 of them, so inside there is a frame, so everything is prepared for the initial burial. And they didn't even bury it. Just a bit of soil on top. So thank you so much. We will await on your new research and new publications. Thank you so much.
Okay, has Ufa joined? Yes. Okay, so we have reader Ruslanova again with us yesterday. How do I share my screen?
Алло, меня слышно? Да, вас слышно. Там сказать, что все включили. Вот теперь есть, да, сейчас. Так, ага. Все, видно? Черный пока экран сейчас запускает.
Well, yes, we're starting. Yes, we're starting. It's there. We can see your slides. Yesterday I was so worried, obviously, that my fuses blew out. But anyways, good morning, and I would like to tell you about the wooden bridges of the ancient town Ufa II. We were the co-authors of this monument, and this monument or site is located in the historical center of the city of Ufa. It's been known for a long time. You can find it on ancient topographical maps, and you can still find it visually on that site. This site is located in the center of large-sized synchronous objects with burials and shrines containing gold. We believe that the ancient town of Ufa too, discovered by Peter Isherikov in 1953 and then dug up by Niyaz Majidov, is a monument of the local elite, if you will. This monument was discovered in 1953. It was studied in the 1950s, but this building was built up by old buildings. It was not until the time when they started to free up this space by demolishing the old buildings to build new ones, new residential complexes, that we got a chance to study it. This is where our historical streets start. It's a very sweet spot for residential developers, and we had to dig it up by 2006, and we had to do it quickly. Archaeologists from the Bashkortostan State University did the digging, and in 2011 the State Museum, the Republican Museum called Ancient Ufa, was founded, and it was until that year that the excavations lasted. 2,072 square meters were examined, and we found quite a lot of interesting collections there. Some aerial views of the excavation site. The yellow marks the site where I work. This is the section of the ancient town. This is the blue one. This is where Mr. Ruslanov worked. And also the excavations went on to the mound. The layers were 4 meters long, up to 4 meters long. And we can see a continuous series of sites from the 3rd century after Christ. You can see different edifices, buildings, and different structures. Let's look at what we found. We have some items from the early times, harkening back to, I think, the early settlements, the Bakhmutins or archaeological culture. It's the 5th and the 6th centuries. This is where the Tur-Baslim people came, that left all these shrines with the Byzantine chains and jewelry. At that time, we believe the town was a trade and administrative hub or center. And these findings, like these sculptures, are also seen as unique by us. It's the 7th, 8th centuries. Beautiful rings. I want to draw your attention to them because I'll be mentioning them later. Also, we have these beads that we associate with the 7th or 8th centuries, these beads. Apparently, there were a number of cultural layers, and here we have some items from the 11th century, but not so many. In the upper layers, we found coins. Some were a lot of them, some they're single, individual ones. The 13th and 14th centuries, we have some items from that time too, and this site was always occupied, it seemed, because we have some Bashkirian ancient records saying that this is the site where local Bashkir tribes came together also. Bakhmutis, Baslimsk, and Kushnarensk, and Krepovsk ceramics examples. This is the mound and the hall. We also found some wooden structures, remnants of plants, bark, but we had to do it quickly. Also some wicker. We had to dig it up quickly. We were not prepared whatsoever, not at all. by 2006, but we did not expect to find any payments there from at a depth of 1 meter to 30 centimeters. They were in a very bad condition. Sometimes it was just a secondary wet layer. These planks were up to 3.5 meters long and 6 to 15 centimeters wide, and they had these little wooden boards 2 to 30 in length. But the researchers, and I was one of the researchers, said that none of us could imagine what it was, what we were in for. So we were uncovering it, we were recording it all, and the payments just kept popping up. The overall length of all of these payments is over 70 meters. And we kept going at it in 2008, for example. We did some excavations also that when we finally concluded that they were actually wooden pavements because they followed the terrain, the relief, and in some places there were wet places like that all the way down from the surface. Also, we did a analysis of them, and it showed that they were made of oak, and there was a lot of oak, so it was the prevalent construction material in that region. In some sites revealed 3 layers of these planks, or layers, wooden layers. Apparently, they were fixed at some point in time. Farid Abdulhakov found some samples from Ufa-2 and sent them to Australia, to southern Wales, for radiocarbon analysis, and the dates were confirmed by the radiocarbon dates. And as for the wooden pavements, they date back to the second half of the 6th and the first half of the 7th century after Christ. And I think they lasted like 75 years within 1 century, in other words, which was also backed up by archaeological material, and when was it dated, because all these glass rings, well, the wooden pavements kind of equate with Novgorod, but when I found the glass rings, and I was a specialist, an expert on glass, I must say, and the first thing that came to mind was Russian or Bulgar rings, which came later, but Rezda Khamilovna then came in to help, and she did a chemical examination of the glass, and it turned out that it was close to Islamic medieval glass between the 5th and the 8th century. So the width of the pavements is over 70 centimeters, so the width is quite regular and standard, common. It's wooden boards, not some logs, and they run for quite a while in terms of their length. So we mapped them because it was a possibility. That possibility presented itself. We put them on that plan, and we came up with this streets. You can see these straight, medianly oriented streets. And Farid Sungatov, well, before I get to that, you can see the wooden pavements that we uncovered in 2012 when I was working there. Apparently, I think there is another street that that hasn't been dug up yet, and Farid Sungatov all associated with the traditions of the Middle Asia and Caucasus because they used clay for building their houses quite often, and now the experts of the Ancient Ufa Museum also believe the same thing, and their website says that it was all this machinery, or not machinery, but these building techniques were characteristic for the Middle Asia and Caucasus. Me and my co-author, Sergei, beg to differ. We believe that, and it's just one of the versions out there, but I think it holds some water. It's quite plausible. This material, we think, is close to the ancient towns of the Bakalsk culture. We have ceramics of the Far Ural group, Bakalsk, that dates to the 4th, 8th centuries after Christ, and analogies of wooden structures similar in design are the Lastочкино гнездо or Stuks Udakst, first ancient town, and the pavements there look like this, like in the picture, that started at the entrance to the city, to the towns, ancient towns. Maybe at the entrance, at the gate, if you will, there also were some pavements that we haven't discovered yet. The Far Ural culture ceramics is also here. The Krasnoyansk-Korychupovsky culture ceramics is also there, so they kind of influenced each other. Kushnarensk ceramics cannot be found under. Here are some fragments that we found in 2012. We were not ready to see such unique objects such as wooden pavements. In the Povolzhia region, we can think of no analogies. We were taking pictures, we were making records, as many as we could, but we had no experience in any restoration or conservation works. In 2012,
Ой, давно меня не слышно?
Нет, совсем немного.
Да? Ага. Ну вот еще раз повторюсь, что у нас не было...
Well, I will repeat myself, sorry, some audio problems. We had no experience in holding conservation, so we used the PVA solution for impregration, and in 2012 for future museification as part of preparation for that, to prepare for that. For museums, we left these containers which contained the wooden, which held the wooden planks. Now the Museum Reserve Ancient Ufa has its own restoration specialist, and we believe that these wooden boards will be restored properly, preserved properly, and then put on display properly in their museum reserve. This territory is hard to study because there is a lot of urban activity happening there, and we believe that the future development of multidisciplinary archaeological research using the latest methods will preserve for future generations what we have found here. Thank you very much for your attention. Rita Raisomna, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your report. What about biological contamination? You put them in containers, but do you check it for any biological contamination? No, we don't. They're not as ideal as they were in 2012, but we try to keep away from them, because by 2024 our plan is to build the museum there with a glass floor that should be very light, and we will be keeping them until that time. It's good that you're keeping away from them, so you have mechanical protection, but now you have to check it for biological contamination regularly, and maybe you will have to use antiseptic, because they were found on wet ground, and maybe you should spray them in order for the upper layers not to over dry, because they're not in an ideal shape. And the second thing, you want to preserve them, you want to museify them on the ground, or what? I don't think you should keep them under glass. It's not one of those cases. You need to take them out, you need to preserve them, and then you need to think of a vitrine to keep them. Otherwise it might fall apart. You should also check that. You should also control them for biological contamination. Any other organic there? Well, the beads were made of glass. We also found, from organic, we found something, this birch bark thing, which we believe had preserved, because it was kind of charred, a little charred, very fragile, but now, following restoration measures, we can see seams there. And as for organics, we have seeds, different seeds, poles, wooden poles in pole holes. Some were round shaped, some square shaped, because which you can tell by the sections. Some had 5-angle shape. How are these? What is the state of these poles? Coming apart or what? No. But they're fine, and we handed them over and back for examination. Another interesting thing is that I want to tell you, my colleagues, if you see something like some knowledges of these wooden boards, they date back to the 6th or 7th centuries, and they were made of wood because some tools were used, some wood techniques for some advanced technique for its separation were used, we believe. Now we have a question. What do you use to keep the wooden pavements together? What did they use to do it? We didn't find anything, actually. No fasteners. I think they were kind of just... I think they installed it just on some pole or something, or on some perch, but they were not interconnected by some fasteners. Thank you very much for the raising them. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a question. Do I understand correctly that they are a single layer? They were not renewed. These are 3 layers of pavements on top of each other, so they were fixed for the duration of 75 years. So 3 layers. They were renewed and renewed. So now we have Nail Sadriyev, junior researcher at the Museum of Archaeology of the Republic of Tatarstan, and he's going to report on the evidences of trade relations in Sviyarsk of the 16th, 17th centuries. Wooden counting tags. Hello everybody, in my report I would like to tell you on the evidence of trade relations in Sviyarsk in 16th, 17th centuries wooden counting tags. All findings were made during the archaeological works on the territory of the town island of Sviyarsk.
Все работы были обнаружены в ходе археологических исследований на территории Остров-град Свияжск 2011.
All findings were made. The Sviyarsk, Andrei Starkov was the head of the excavations, and the total area was 2.1 thousand square meters. You can have a look. So before the research and after the research, an archaeological finding allowed us to identify the following chronological parts of finding the Tatar settlement excavation site and the archaeological area is up to 300 centimeters. Sviyarsk becomes, at the end of the 16th century, a big trading center, and in the trading log of 1560s it says that in the central part of the city there were around 300 shops, small shops selling fish, bread, etc. On the territory of the fortress was another market. There's a reconstruction of so the green one, there are trading areas that are marked, and there are. It is confirmed, the archaeological findings, the historical documents confirm that were found during the works in the layers of 16th, 18th century. We can see foreign houseware, Nuremberg counting parts, so from Europe. So all of that confirms the trading relations. Another group of objects found during the archaeological works could be used during the trade. We're talking about the wooden counting tags. They were widely used at those times. It is old Ladoga, Novgorod, Pskov, Tarzhok, Tver, and the researchers outline a number of types of them. There's accounting and the tags, they have a cuts made on it. The collection of the wooden items which were identified as these were done during the archaeological works, and there are 5 samples. The layers of they relate to the second half of the 16th, second half of the 17th century. Despite the small amount of the items found, we can outline some peculiarities of the length varies from 15 up to 22 centimeters diameter, 1.5 up to 4.5 centimeters. 4 items were made out of pre-treated wood. And there's like a round link which is sharp on one. One object had triangle. For 3 samples we have found as being fractured, and we glued them together in the Museum of the Archaeology of the Republic of Tatarstan, but not special wood was used. Sometimes they used the broken in unnecessary things. Here, one of those tags, initially it was used as the construction upholstery, and then it was used as a tag, and the amount of cuts changes. One tag was located next to the top. One sapel had 7 cuts. It can be either counting to count some actions, or the labeling tag. The cuts might mean the amount of the good or the price for the goods. However, due to the fact that it was broken before, it's difficult to say how many cuts were there in the first place. I'd like to sum up, and I can say that the collection of the wooden tags, despite the fact that it is so small, it is an important source to study the material culture of the ancient cities of Russia. It allows us to fill the existing information and to continue with studies. And the wood, type of wood, no, we didn't do it yet, but you're no specialists. Maybe you will find common points for cooperation. So we are going to continue to wait with the continuance of the report. Our next report is Georgy Alexandrovich Shati. Georgy Shati, Curator, Department of Reserve Collections of the State Historical Architectural and Art Museum Reserve, Town Island of Sviyersk. Household items of the 16th, 17th centuries with traces of repair, on the example of wooden plates for knives from excavations on the territory of Sviyersk. Okay, good. It's inevitable that things break, and at all times people were fixing household items. And among the findings of archaeological items, we can see the traces of repairs. I'd like to tell you a number of objects that we found in this town island of Sviyersk. When working with a collection of knives, we have found 3 knives. So we can say that these knives were repaired. All 3 knives, we can see. So these things were broken, and we needed to replace them and to change them for the new ones. So the first knife is coming from the household number 85, dated by the second half of the 16th century, and then knife number 3 and the knife number 3 is coming from Sule, and this layer is the second half of the 16th century. So these finds relate to, they were assembled, and so the wooden planks looking like that, and then sticking together. The narrow family has a figure at the bottom of the handle. Such type of knives appeared in the 13th, 14th century and became more massive for production in 13th, 14th century. It is clear that knives with such handles were used in 17th and 18th centuries as well. And some of this type, there were marks made, so this category of findings was European. Because the Russian blacksmiths didn't do it. Here is an example, one of the knives that we have found in Svirsk. The work of the collection of knives from the Tatarskaya settlement allowed us to split the knives by the grade of preservation, how preserved they are. So we can see with two slabs, there's only 8% that lost the elements, so this is 41%. We can say that these two big groups are pretty much the same. The findings of the slates found separately, handled slates, and the repaired one are 8% of the total amount of finding. So they were repairing those wooden planks over there. So was it in the stone or the wood in the first place? So it's in such fixture it's easier to install it on the knife yourself. However, the results of the anatomical finding of the wood allows us to look at it from the different angle. So, in accordance with the conclusion of the technical expertise of the State Hermitage, all three were made out of wood of the same type, and it was black rosewood, and such peculiarities as small pores and narrow vessels allow us to say that as black rosewood, Melanoxian, known as African black rosewood. So, it's a tropical trees, and African works grows in Africa, in those areas that you see on the slide. And African blackwood was a valuable part of the international trade at that time, starting since the Bronze Era. Plus, we found a number of logs of the African blackwood. So, Sant'Antonio de Tana, Portugal vessel that sunk next to Mombasa. It was found 200 logs of black rosewood, African rosewood. So the officers of the ship, they have taken additional loads in order to sell it. But we do not know the written and archaeological finding of import of the African black rosewood to the Moscow, so the Svirsk findings can be the starting point for the research in that matter, because we haven't found African black rosewood anywhere else. Consequently, this finding confirms the international trade at that time, and we can propose that the parts of the handles are the original, and they were installed at knives when produced, and after fixed it was replaced more allowed bone ones. It's not clear where they were produced in the first place, because we do not know how this good entered the Moscow region as a raw material or as the finished product. We need more research to answer the question. And we need more findings. Thank you so much.
Well, I congratulate you on this excellent finding. You breathed a second life into it, and you gave it new names, like a fascinating detective story. It's fascinating. And you found this item again on the shelf, which is a good example of the fact that preliminary research gives you great results like that, and you could establish that they had trade relations with Africa. I enjoyed your report a lot, as the administrator, our Minister of Culture sends us a lot of requests. Like, one of the requests was to come up with a cooperation offer for Senegal. Now I know what to answer. I can say that we have to have something from their land, from their turf. I have a question. Did you show the percentage ratio of knives? Not so many knives of the type. I think 20. Well, the collection of knives is quite large, but there is over 100 finds. But mostly it's just knife elements and something of the sort, but not complete knives. Thank you. The next speaker is online, Evgeny Chetvertakov from the Nizhny Novgorod region, about reconstruction. You were telling us about reconstruction. I would like to greet all of the participants. I'm Evgeny Chetvertakov, and I work at the Dalny-Konstantinovsky Museum, located in the Nizhegorодsk region. A master carpenter from Mr. Bitkin from the village of Saravataha is, the person actually to make this report. This summer I visited the Museum of Archaeological Wood, I must say, in Sviazhsk. And I was fascinated when I saw the methods of reconstruction of wooden structures of the New Age and of the Newest Age, because when the trade of a center of archaeological wood in the Konstantinovsky village has a problem with the reconstruction of wooden structures of the New Age and of the Newest Age. And my report will be around these issues, because now we are restoring the face, the shape of the Terukhansk casket. The Mordva Terukani are an indigenous people that live there, and their ancestors still live, their descendants still live there, 50-70 kilometers away from our administrative center, which is the city of Nizhny Novgorod. The Mordva Terukani inhabited a region which was first the Terushevsk Volest of the Nizhegorodsky Governorate, and now it's called the Dalny-Konstantinovsky Municipal District, and it's part of the Nizhegorодsk District. This territory is quite compact, quite small in terms of its area. The Mordva Turkani are an interesting people. They used to be an ethnic group that made up quite a complex Mordva people in general. They lost their ethnicity characteristic in the early 20th century because of subjective processes going on, state and economic processes, collectivization, the Great Patriotic War, and the descendants of the Mordva Turkan now live as an ethnographic group in that district. And when we look at them, we can find some elements of the material and spiritual culture pointing to their Mordva recent past, or not so distant past. And we will dwell on it when I get to one of the last slides. I won't fit everything about the Mordva Turkani into this report, but we've issued 3 publications recently, all following up our scientific conferences. Most of the materials laid out in these publications revolve around different aspects of the history of this ethnic group of the Mordva. You can find these 3 collections. Nizhgorodsk Mordva is history and culture, the peoples of the Middle Povolzhia, bridges from the past, and the Povolzhsk Finns. And these are the names of the book. The territory of the Dalny Konstantinovsky district is known for its diverse Cherkassk caskets and graveyards. This map shows or marks all the known caskets and graveyards of the Mordva Turkan from the Middle Ages till now. The most well-known of the graveyards or coffins was the Sarlaysk coffin or casket or burial site. In terms of historic records and talking about the history of the Turkansk ethnicity. Our research, archaeological research, has been around the Starselsk burial site, and we examined it in fine detail between 2016 and 2019. Over that period of time, we examined 150 square meters, and we uncovered 41 burials. What caught our eye, first of all, was the type of burial characteristic for Azyansky burial sites and for the Mordva Turkans. I mean, group burials or dual burials, and you can see that it's like a family of 2 people, and quite often of 3 people, 2 adults and 1 teenager. These are conditional family groups, so they must have been families, husband and wife, buried at different times, at different points in time, but in one burial mound. And the burial chamber was like this. And the issue about the burial, how it looked, and all these bodies were buried in the 16th and 17th centuries. The wooden structures at the Sarley burial site and at the Staroselsky burial site are not so good, not so well preserved. These burial chambers, the wood is almost gone. This slide shows you the most well preserved parts of this complex wooden structure from the 18th, 17th century. Quite well preserved is a beam of wood and at the edge you can see some hull or some part of wood that was lowered into the burial chamber. The closest analogy to these wood structure can be found across Berdyansk burial sites, but there it was only under burial site mounds, but there are no burial mounds over these burial chambers, which should point to the fact that they must have used some structures to lower bodies in there. Or caskets, sorry. Archaeology-wise, we can see some features, however small they are. These structures are characteristics for dual or family groups. The sizes vary between 1.5 to 3 meters. And also typical is wooden beams, and for the 16th, 17th century structures, no metal, no nails or anything like that. When we got around to reconstruction, we decided to turn to as many sources as possible to give us, to help us with poorly preserved structures, and the earliest archive records are the documents that have to do with the events that took place in the mid-17th century, the Terushevsky-Mordovsk rebellion. I mean, the documents on it are kept in the state archive. And there we can find a description of the Terukan caskets on a burial site, and the rebellion, which lasted between 1743 and 1745, was quite a tragic event for the community, and it had to do. This is what led to these burial sites. The new episcopate, Dmitry Sechenov, which came from Kazan to Nizhny Novgorod, during one of his trips, decided to stop by the closest Orthodox cathedrals and went to the Cathedral of Annunciation in the Sarleeva village, and when he arrived there, he was surprised by what he saw at the local cemetery, where he saw wooden structures which can be identified as Terukan's caskets, and he ordered to burn them down on that same day, which led to the tragic events that followed and lasted between 1743 and 1745, that ended up, which led to the Dragoon regiment entering the district, and some punitive measures, severe punitive measures were taken. These are the earliest records of a burial site that we have. Ethnographic and written data on the Mordva traditions and caskets like that on cemetery didn't give us much, and the ethnographic sources mostly talk about poles and Mordva caskets, and the Turkans are part of the large Mordva people, and we found no record of that. In the ethnographic, 19th century ethnographic data talks about or mentions these complex caskets, like a record from the Seal of Lobatsk from 1887, Lobatsk. There was like one burial site like a cellar. It was made of wood without windows, and the second part of it was a wooden made structure without any windows. So we decided to look at culture parallels here. Caskets of the old believers of the Zavolzhye region. Also we looked at Siberian Tatars and the houses of the dead of the peoples of the north, which we believe are the closest to what we have in Nizhny Novgorod. But the Finnish people of Karelia have the closest because of the specifics of the wood of that little cabin. This picture in the middle shows that the casket is made like this. Structurally, it's very closer to the Turikansk caskets. And the next source of information was the latest Turikansk burial casket that you could find up until 2021 on the Sarley graveyard. Throughout the 20th century, the people kept up this tradition as it turned out. However, these monuments, if you will, these caskets were put as a cultural site. They were not placed over burial sites. It was just there to keep up the tradition. But we can find archival data backing up the fact, showing us information how they did it until 1880 something. Alexei Ustinov, a local from the big Seskina village, put this casket together, which helped us a lot because the first stage to build our casket was fixing this Sarley casket, measuring it, taking pictures, characterizing the axing technologies or the felling technologies and the materials. The material is pine only. Some major features can be found here. The roof is made of pine small wooden boards without any nails. But the substrate for philological, but give us some basis for further work. The remnants of this casket were used as a dump site, and the local community council decided to turn it into a monument in 2021. Igor Bitkin came up with this little casket, and he built it without any modern fasteners, without electricity, to go to fully traditional. And the first stage was finding pine, and then this little casket. The lower part that was lowered into the burial site was assembled, and then the part that was over the burial site was assembled. The fourth part was putting the bark on it and the substrate. The substrate was based on the archaeological data that we had. Most of the time it was combined with bark also. Ethnographic data gave us some information on birch bark that was used for the roof, and also, since we were not using any nails, we used a rope, and the rope was made in a traditional way. And the last stage that we're working on right now is in the center of the traditional culture of Konstantinovo Pole. We will soon be putting on display this reconstructed Mordva Tukan casket. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. It's an important topic that you touched, reconstruction. Reconstructions help us study ancient technologies. When you are reconstructing something, a lot of details emerge. So reconstruction is important in that regard, and wood is not well preserved at all most of the time, where there are traces of wood and where you can take some measurements, or the fragments available can help us do a reconstruction. They help what we're reconstructing become more popular, more demonstrative, have a better demonstrative effect, because it's easier to reconstruct sometimes than to build something from the ground up, because something that we want to reconstruct maybe cannot be reconstructed. And these copies made according to, well, the ways that were used to build them, copying the technological approaches, the techniques, are also used, especially when the original is gone. Thank you very much for the ethnographic data that you presented also, in presenting this wide range of Uyghur peoples. Thank you very much. Seems there are no questions. Next speaker, Nail Sadriyev. We're glad to see you again. The co-author is Valentina Alexandrovna, who's you know, Nail. He'll be telling us about wooden toys in Suyashki. It's a classification review. Thank you very much. I won't be telling you much about digging. Games and game inventory of the Suyashk people are presented by 100 items from bone. From bone, from ceramic. They can be grouped into 3 types: kids for toys, table toy games, and adult toys. We have audio games, personal musical instruments for kids, anthropomorphic and zoomorphic figures, imitations of guns, arrows and bows, and transportation boats made of tree bark. It includes findings for moving and combat games like volleyball, wooden balls, alchiks. The tabletop games are presented by some chess boards, but there are not so many of them. The most common material for building toys is clay, 44%. However, of particular interest is wooden toys, which is a very popular material for building different toys. It's very available, no specific skills, and the simplest toys were manufactured sometimes by kids themselves. Wooden toys are not en masse, so each wooden toy found is unique, of course. Archaeological wooden items identified as toys were found during the archaeological research works in many medieval towns of Russia, Tobolsk, Novgorod, Mangazi, and many others. The work will be I will be using this basic classification following the Novgorodsk archaeological expedition. children toys. Here we have weapon toys and transportation. 18 items were found, the biggest group, and you can see little boats here carved out of bark. The length is like boats with an aft. The sizes vary. Some of them are fragmented.
And the length of 6 from 28 centimeters. So 28 centimeters is like the full form. The copies of the equipment, we have 2 wooden swords and 2 bows. One is quite complete, the other one having some losses. So these are the toys copies of weapon and transport. It's simple. Any kid can do a bow, and we have 2 samples of bow toy.
Игрушки представлены единичным экземпляром. Это единственный обнаруженный деревянный находка.
The only is it of we have the doll as well at the parts of the doll at the bottom right corner of the slide, and we have also the drumstick here and the pipe, 2 toys, and drumstick made out of a single piece of wood. A unique piece is the pipe, panpipe. It's empty inside. It was carved out of the complete piece of wood, and there's a geometrical ornament on one side. Not many of such findings have occurred. The universal toys, we have 15 samples of them, like for the competition games. Wooden balls. We have a bat, and we have a peg top or spinneret. These were used for the games, and for peg tops we have 9 samples of them. Has the top. So it was. The game was quite popular. And we found many of them in Sviazhsk and in the other towns of Russia. Board games, 2 samples, and we have chess figures here. We found 2 figures of chess made out of bark of the dark wood, and the second one is cut out of wood, and it had a conical form. So the collection of such toys is a valuable piece to study the culture of people living here, and it is filling the collection of the findings. And yeah, thank you so much. I would like to add that interesting parallels. Just yesterday in the Facebook, our outstanding musician Sergei Starostin, who visited Sviazhsk, he was very much interested in that wooden pipe and to understand the dating and surrounding of the object. So I give your contacts to him, because you noted quite correctly there are not many of such musical instruments, and they are very important for their answers. And as the finding about the balls, and we said that the football actually was born here, we can say, when people played it with wooden balls. And this can be once again confirmed by the archaeological findings. And then there was chess. One chose the bark from the black tree. So yeah, it's poplar, made out of bark of poplar. And now we have a coffee break for 15 minutes. Okay, we are to continue, and the next presentation will be provided will be given on dendrochronological analysis So here is the slide, dendrochronological analysis of archaeological wood of the town island of Sviyarsk. And I would like to tell you, on the initial stage, the works were conducted 2009 to 2012. Looking at the bank line and archaeological findings, the key, we have found that at the bottom part of the Sviyarsk town island was a wet cultural layer which was formed. We have found the wooden objects that were sealed with soil and moisture, so that the first digging out, the archaeological research allows us to establish the average dates, the dating of the wood, and to have the more precise data we had to attract the scientific specialists of dendrochronologists. Well, the wood and the length of dendrochronology, many was said about it, and it was used when dating the cultures. When the cross-dating, you can have a look how it looks at the slide. We find the data of the formation when the tree was logged. So, on the external ring, it is initial when finding the time, and for that work we use the local chronologies, and as that was said, absolute dendrochronological scales created for a specific type of a wood and geographical district. So next slide, please. In our analysis we use dendro scales, which were created before on the basis of studies of the live wood, live trees in our region, so that there are no wood. So we looked at the architectural wood, because there are no wood older than 300 years old, live trees, I mean. And here is the example. On the right there is a house that we have studied. And on the basis of that, we have created the wooden chronologies on the scales that we used when dating the archaeological wood of the town island of Sviyarsk. So coming to the results, we'll start since 2009, when it all commenced. Around the quarry of the Sviyarsk of the town island, out of the excavations of 2008, there was a preliminary selection on the cross-section of the logs of the oak. Dendrochronological analysis revealed that the external rings, they have different dates, which are in the period from 1591 to 1633. Then, in the next year, in 2010, it became more interesting, because we started with the more massive excavations. in the place of the new quarry, where there was a digging out, we have selected 3 cross sections of pines and oaks. So, item number 3, they were dated by the middle of 18th century, pine 1743 and 1737 respectively, for oak and for pine. The dates were different, and the most interesting was, because the topic is archaeological wood, so some in 2010 I have understood that archaeological wood, it's not a simple object to study. You all do remember year 2010, it was extremely hot, and the hot weather, to remember. So abnormally hot weather, caused what was on the surface for a number of days became unuseful for dendro analysis. So after 2 or 3 days, it dried out in full. I don't know how to say it scientifically. It was just went into pieces. And the anatomical analysis, it was impossible to do it. What we were able to do, we have gathered it, and that's why there are not that many findings. But in year 2012, that was about the Tatar settlement. A lot was said by Nail about the toys and the knives. This is very interesting because this is the Tatar settlement. We have selected 21 samples of the archaeological wood, 13 cairns. Yeah, you can see. This allowed us not to destroy the structure of the log with which we have worked. So anatomical analysis revealed there was a regular pine, 81%, oak is the second popularity, and then birch, and almost is 1%. As a result, we were dating it from the item number 43. The dates were there 1658, 1659. So here at this slide, there's the works, excavations, houses that we have studied. It is clear that not everywhere we were able to pick it and select it, but we have considered all of the problems of the year 2010. And I shall note that quite a big amount of samples were impossible to date it. And it is related to bad climatic signal and the geographical origin of the construction material. We propose that there was imported wood, brought to the region from other spots. This we need to have additional proof for that. When creating the long-term chronologies, we need to consider that we can date only the local wood, particularly in our conditions, which is taken from the trees growing within the single climatic region. In parallel, we were studying the architectural wood, which is presented at this slide because in 2010 the restoration have started. That is the jail, school, and all known the wooden churches and the wooden elements of the Assumption Cathedral. Well, my report is very short, and I would like to thank, really, the Kazan archaeologists that have assisted us in full. I'm very grateful to them Well, this is it. Thank you so much. Dennis, thank you. Great work has been performed. Big work. Thank you so much. Yeah, there is a question. On the basis of what? So you mean the last slide, right? Or the first one? On the 19th century. So these are the houses of the city of Kazan with full description when it was done, how it was made. Because we have built a chronology using the Raifa forest. The chronology is middle 17th century, and these chronologies we tried to cross-link with architectural wood of the city of Kazan. We were unable to date it, but the city of Kazan was built from the local wood. This is absolutely truth. So this is historical information and our dendrochronological analysis and the cross-dating for that. I have found it out because it's a separate topic from where the wood is coming. And this is, Did you have wood which was brought here from the upper parts of Volga or from Maka River with estuaries? Thank you. It is known that the construction material, the logs, were delivered by the stream of Volga downstream. It's a well-known fact, but impossible to date. The archaeological wood confirms that this is the wood that was brought in here. So most probably that the wood that is coming from the western part of Volga region. So when we referred to our colleagues, to archaeologists, Alexei have assisted us in our work. There were certain samples which were dated quite well, but statistical preciseness was low. So we work on that issue, and we believe that there must be samples which would come from the western part of Volga. Last year I have visited Svetluga River, 80 meters excavation, so there was a ship found, so flat-bottomed boats, and it was offloaded, and then it was disassembled for logs and stuff. You can connect with the director of the museum. Maybe he would give you, Yuri Vladimirovich. This is very interesting how the wood was supplied. Thank you for the questions. So, from Nizhny Novgorod to Kazan, this part, it's not studied dendrochronologically. I try to work around Kazan mostly. Here we are lacking specialists. Moscow specialists, they are loaded, and so this gap, this territory is lacking. So there are no flat-bottomed boats. But this is out of a sudden, and it was sunk in Vitluga. The supplies were and how they were done. That was extremely interesting. I can give you the contacts of the director of the United Museums of Nizhny Novgorod. So, yeah, success in your future research.
Katerina Zabaikal, curator, museum projects of Ice Cream Company, unique wooden exhibit at the new exposition of the Old Ladoga Museum Reserve. Hello, and well, the pointer is now working. Good. Hello, colleagues. First, many thanks to the organizers of the conference, to all the colleagues here, not only for your scientific reports, but for the work you're doing that's important for the country. And for the whole world in general. I have a report that is not really scientific. It's about the unique wooden exhibits in the new exposition of the Stara Museum Reserve. I think many of you have visited this place, Stara Ladoga, Old Ladoga maybe, and you know the reserve. However, late last year, we opened a new exposition in the tower, in the Arrow Tower of the museum for the visitors in the settlement and for the residents of the region and for the scientific community in general. It was a monumental landmark event because the new exposition features from early Neolithic to exhibits, and in 2015 they reconstructed the Arrow Tower starting from the stone base. They reconstructed 4 parts of it and then they opened the new exposition. In 2016 we did the sketch, and when we chose the drawings and the right designs, it kind of was delayed. It was a long process. Me and my colleagues got over to the exhibits to the exposition in 2019, and 1 year later, the exposition opened up in 2020. Well, the collection of Old Ladoga Museum Reserve is quite vast, over 3,000 exhibits, 100 of them made of wood. I'm not the one to tell you how specific the wet layer in Ladoga is. Many unique wooden or leather, bone, and other items have been well preserved. And the fact that we have this new archaeological exposition in our region is a landmark event for the cultural life of our country. And we also have amber exhibits. The tower has 4 levels. The second level of it is like an entrance. The third and the fourth levels have expositions. The third one has the Neolith of the Southern Periladogia exposition and the skull of a Neolith person to be first time in the last 100 years. It's the most important. It's the hallmark. It also features the collection of Inostrantsova of the late 19th century, and most of the exhibits are located on the 4th level of the tower, the biggest in terms of items, and the most important one, of course, because it covers the whole period of the early medieval age of the local region, military, clothes, utensils, religious, construction. All around we have items about all of that and even more. And what I need to point out here is a few key, unique exhibits that have been well preserved that are greatly preserved, which makes them all the more unique. All the themes have wooden exhibits and exhibits made of other organic materials. The boat section and the tray section, and so on in the same section, has wood fragments of boats which are large-sized. 70 centimeters, 50 centimeters, give or take. We have that thing that is well preserved. We have the fasteners, some fasteners. You can see one of them in the slide, but we have more. And it's not only wooden exhibits, but also loads that came to some coins. Silver coins and other things can be seen here. Another interesting section is the House of Entertainment, we call it. For the first time, we have this pole for roofs. It's about 1.5 meters in height. We also have the baluster. Or bolsters, sorry. Another thing during the last exposition in the House of Kalasin, they had a collection, but it was good, but just it made up 1% of all the items that was actually available. There was one temporary exhibition, and they exhibited this game board with these little bone items for playing. Some different figures. We have a duck figure on display. Another interesting theme is around religion and religious views. These vitrines have wooden copies or mock-up models of important things from Old Ladoga, and two things, items of metal. Where do I press?
В общем, здесь представлены, да, еще две интересные
Two more interesting, fascinating anthropomorphic figures that weren't exhibited too many times. The head of an animal among them. And the final point here is a big thematic part, is about kitchen utensils in China and means of transportation, like a part of a sledge. Many items that are well preserved, like this whisk. They're well preserved. Thank you very much. If you haven't seen the new exposition in Old Ladoga, I invite you on behalf of my colleagues to visit it, and a special thanks to Ludmila Vlachevskaya and Alona Zalogina, who have done a lot for this exposition to come into being. And I would like to thank all of the other colleagues from the Museum Reserve. Thank you very much, Tatiana Alexeyevna. I'd like to add that I enjoyed this exposition because many of the wooden items were restored in our lab by Clara Fyodorovna and Tatiana Alexandrovna and many other people from our lab. It's not only about archaeology, it's about the history of restoration, not only the history of archaeology. They are in a great shape, with the exception of a few things that weren't treated, because you can see that they dried up on their own. Some of the items dried up on their own, but they're also in a good shape. Those that were impregnated with all the techniques adhered to, they are in a great shape. And it's gratifying to know that we have the vitrines with circulated climate control, which is very good. It's a very striking exposition, and I would like to see more of expositions like that. You know, So many techniques, restoration techniques were used to restore these items dating back to the 1960th centuries. And the peg method that we brought from Sweden, the chlorophyll brought from Sweden, it was also used by her to save some of the old Latgai items. This city, our colleagues didn't fail to visit your conference, but next year I hope they will come and tell you more about how what we did to preserve your items. Well, we're getting closer to the end of our conference, and Ilya Artamontov, Director of Art Design, Honored Artist of the Republic of Tatarstan, will tell us about artistic design of the Sviazhsk Museum exposition Archaeological Wood, Tasks, Images and Solutions. Good morning, dear colleagues. My name is... I'm an artistic designer. I've been working on museum expositions for more than 20 years. Dear colleagues, esteemed colleagues, you know why we're esteemed, but you're my colleagues because when you are working with museums, you become a little bit of an astronomer, of an ecologist, of a restaurator. You kind of delve into each and every profession that you have to deal with a little bit, and it's very gratifying to me. Let's start. The role of historical memory is becoming one of the most important tools in determining the steps that the civilization has taken or is going to take for evolution. And the deeper, the better researchers, dendrologists, restaurators, and others work, representations of deep knowledge for humans, it becomes more important despite of their background, cultural belonging, and the language that they speak. The role of interpretation of the product of research of specialists becomes important, who can help us preserve historical memory. One of the first ways of self-consciousness of Homo sapiens beings can be found in these mountain imprints. It happened long before we learned to write. This was the first act of self-identification. Then we have scenes of hunting and everything that becomes important for our preservation as a species. And the visual images developed and evolved with our civilizations. The more evolved we are, the more important the symbols become. All the great images had some purpose to serve, for some ideology, and indirectly when there was some social demand for it. The images were used to broadcast and promote complex views of life, and the development of writing brings pictures to books, if you will. Architecture imbibes frescoes and mosaics, folk decoration and applied art. Here we see the integration of images everywhere. Saint writings of the Middle Age are reflected in canon images. The Renaissance is about harmony of the body. Naturalmort reflects the value of the world around us at first glance. Items, apart from their materialism, acquire a shape of their own through the perception of the painter, and in the system of coordinates that we have, each of them have their symbols, and their combinations gives rise to interesting dialogue. And this is how we teach pictures to talk. Crises at the turn of centuries, and revolutionary scientific findings and new technologies impacted greatly image art in the 20th century. The rhythms, the colors, the composition tools are being studied. We move away from figurativeness, but then embrace surrealism and then its installations. Each of these areas is born by many authors and pursued by hundreds and thousands of authors. Suprematism gave a new breath to the architecture of design. we're going to take a look at an example of that. Surrealism found its niche in cinematography. Installations, the talk of the world of things, talks about us, frozen in the mise-en-scene, and this way has been the best to broadcast museum exhibits where the space and visual connections of items become important and the way they're connected to different contexts. Museum expositions become translators of the research into images. Without cooperation, it would not be possible between specialists. The Museum of I would like to thank all the staff, all the researchers under the director of the State Academy of Science of the Republic of Tatarstan, Mr. Siddiq. When we were building this museum, a number of tasks. We need to find the shape and measurement of time, which can be different. A visual and tactile perception of wood architecture find a forum to reflect the many aspects of restoration, to create installations of the arts of the residents of Slobodka. The main task for the designers and painters was to rely on in situ principle to create a space showing the construction horizons of the city development across many centuries, but represented in archaeological, but still impressive, like that.
The solution of such tasks is impossible. You need to have the arts design approaches and installation equipment. And I would like to note myself and co-authors in the decoration of the excavations panorama of the Sviyersk. They have studied in the Central Experimental Studio of the Union of Artists of USSR and called the Senyezh, that developed the previous experience of such educational institutions as Bauhaus and Frutamas. Knowing the impossibility in the architectural forms in the historical environment, they have resolved an issues in identifying the looks in Sviyersk, the green hills in Sviyersk. So this is the archetype became as a hint to create the condition of the museum to the existing landscape environment. The second motive to resolve the facades was the remembering of the Sviyersk Bank, welcoming the guests from mysterious objects and creating the feeling that the whole island stays on the wooden logs. Any object has its scenario, and on the basis of that we have the museum exposition, and the visitor has go himself through this play or this artistic and interactive accents himself. To understand the most complex material, we need to find the key. See, for instance, of dendrochronology, we created the interactive expo over this 20 audio subjects. Such accents revive the understanding of the visitor and allow them to trust it. Topical aspects, the story of the architecture, restoration projects, and how people resided here are surrounding the central part of the exposition. The design and the creation of the installation started with 3D modeling. We need to reinvent it once again. Headed by the specialists and restorators, we have created 3D models of all of the items that was excavated, and then we assembled them together within the construction horizons. As a result, we have a spatial structure that we can turn around, analyze it from the point of view of the historical preemptiveness, its axis, and as the result to forecast the events leading to its changes. So we have placed the accented topical points of connections with expo points under the perimeter. As the result, there is a possibility to implement one of the first ideas of the design work, so put the visitor inside of the object. There was a bridge. Bridge going, it's like a street going through this ancient settlement. So, in such approach, wholesome approach, allowed us to receive the following task. So we need to understand that we need to have the 2 points of having a look at the connection in between them, because there's space to adapt it from different levels. Plus, so 2-level terrace expo allowed us to put 2 construction horizon, number 4 and number 3. The 4th one sits on land, and the 3rd one is on the cultural layer. If at the moment with installation we're able to fix of the conquering of the island, then there are fisheries or the fire reconstruction of the residues of the oven. So we started to maintain the restoration monitoring of each element of the unit so that it can be easily moved and fixed. It's a truly grandiose volume that we have achieved here, very important, emotional, to take the central object of the museum. So there's the image of the settlement floating in the air and time, revealing the mysteries to the visitor. From the initial sketches we have understood that we need to have additional elements to be in place. That's how the purpose gets. So the main attention was paid to the surrounding walkways. There was an expo perimeter in terms of structure of horizontal panels with integrated windows. To X day, or from gray and dark day, it's not just a basis of like the soil, but it's the gray color has a unique. If you put a red point in there, so it tells to our mind the brightest image. We're looking at it through the central installation and the color accents of the perimeter. These are expositional encatchment, so the visitor moves it and changing the point of view and how it looks. We paid special attention how the models and objects would be taken through and from the inside of the excavation. In various plans, there are fragments of the construction oriented in the same axis on the podium of the surrounding route. The special task was how to come back to the overall review of the overall installation, or how to come closer to the initial feeling. Well, that multi-faced, we were quite amazed and giving the sacral picture to sacral meaning to all of it. Of course, but working in the team has one peculiarity, and the targets that are set not by the author, by himself, but provides very interesting solutions, very interesting results. We're able to understand that one of the points is to live in our memory. So it's like a part of the project of the events that were there before, to feel the pulsation of the age that passed away. On one hand, we need to transfer people and time and to maintain the connection with the island. To solve those tasks, we have proposed the final element of the exposition. Looking towards the island, he sees the panorama of Suyersk with its life. So that animated image is the scientific reconstruction. So to look at the animated panorama, we have resolved the problem how to elevate the person overlooking the excavation area, so you can look both, and to kind of unite the emotional feeling from the exposition. Looking with artistic design, the artist not only brings the practice and tools to search for plastic images identified by the scientific concept, but also gets experience for future cultural development of his, or artistic development of his. New knowledge appears here. I would like to thank everyone who have created the concept of the Museum of the Archaeological Wood, who made a decision on creation of the museum and was implementing the technical tasks. All who have provided funding. Special thanks I would like to give to the town island of Suyersk, because they have given me the possibility to familiarize the conference with the work that we have delivered. Thank you so much. And I would like to add here that in the creation of a museum, the hosting in 2013 the conference similar of today, related to wet layers, archaeological layers. There are colleagues from Vasa Museum and from the Museum of Belarus, where the big museum was created in the Soviet era. And on the basis of the results of this conference, the resolution of this conference, it was proposed by our management to create this museum. And this initiative was supported, so I hope that the final of our today's conference will become the future movement towards the museification of the objects of our heritage. And I would like to join and say the words of gratitude, and I would like to wish that there are more museums like that. I would like to thank you for filling of wood, and thank you so much for the implementation of those ideas. I do hope that and the other museums in the other regions will be there as well. We have loads of structures, have loads of museums. They're all with ideas. The findings, they're all symbolic, and it's highly important so that these symbols are shown and that they're known, that they're demonstrated. I would like to thank you for your hard work. Thank you. So we have another video recording. This is the report of Yuri Filipov, director of the Nizhny Novgorod State Architectural Museum Reserve. Wooden vessels with look on the materials of expedition of 2017-2021. This is a pre-recorded video, we'll have a look at it. So in summer 2021 was extremely dry, and Because of that, in the rivers of Nizhny Novgorod region, and everywhere we see a very low level of water that is still there, and thanks to that, on the Vetluga River we have found another 2 wooden vessels, and archaeological remains of those vessels, of those ships, because after that we have found them, our museum, there were 2 expeditions sent, and we have received very good material on future research and for future scientific research. Of course, I cannot tell in full about those vessels because we have very big work on research. There are loads of mysteries around it. And thanks to the fact that we have good means of visual support, we have the full picture now. The one vessel, it is in the bottom part of Vetluga, lower part of Vetluga River, and represents, it is a bark. And to identify it to the book of Shubin, published in 1927, this is more like a small Kolomenka type of the vessel. We have filmed it from the quadricopter. The water is very transparent because it's late autumn, and from the top we can clearly see it. And in the first place in our museum practice, we tried the underwater camera, and we were able to make these working drawings. And we see on them that it's only like half of the ship was preserved, but we have the full set out. We have the keel area. Мы имеем сохраненные опруги, двойную обшивку. And all the details are connected by the iron chunks that are connected to it. We have the nose and the back of the ship well preserved as well. As I've said, the length is 21.5 meters. And by the size, by the dimension of it, it is identified as Malaya Kolomenka. These are the ships that were built of different dimensions that were there. I will also tell on the thickness of the logs and the boards. So it'll be done by the scientific article. So this, we're highly interested in that. And what's the most important, it doesn't have big dimensions as our Vetluga. It has a flat bottom. And as a result of the underwater, so with wooden holsters, they are attached to the rest of the structure, so all mixed technologies of the shipbuilding. The second one has given us more mysteries. It is located a bit higher, a bit upstream, and it has a very original form, has a triangle back and a surrounded nose. So the steering mechanisms remains are present, and some authoritative people dealing with shipbuilding of the river. So these are remains of the queue of the 50s, and we cannot say it for sure because in the ship we have certain traditional things. For instance, the structures, how they are connected by the threaded connections. Yes, this is the 20th century. But And this is a pre-revolutionary items, the connector. So in some spots and throughout the Soviet era, it was done. We also know that at the Gorky automotive plant, Americans worked who used the inch-based thread, but not the metal one. But this has to refer to our future research. This is the second vessel that we have. It's not on the water, it's on the bank, and the first one that I told you about. And we see that the wood quite in a good preservation state, and it gives us hope for future museification of it. Winter is coming, I do not know. Maybe once we will go again there. But these are the main dimensions. We have taken them, and now we have to do the office work to identify everything. And as the result, I have said we have taken a number of samples of wood, which will be sent to Moscow to identify the age of these two vessels. Vitluga River still amazes us. We are unaware of the level of water for the next year, but we know where these two are located, and we will continue our work and our research. Dear friends, summer 2021 was extremely dry. That was the video. That is the video recording. I just would like to comment that, well, in our zone we have many findings of similar ships. 5 kilometers from here, where Sviaga falls into Volga, is a wooden ship over there. And around Gribini settlement, so it's about 40 kilometers, and it's well known. The only thing is, well, we were not dealing with the extraction of those vessels from the place of their location. It's very difficult document-wise, and plus the perspectives of their preservation are unclear. In accordance with the literature available to us, they were built up to 40s, so we have the publication on the Volga shipbuilding, and such types were built. And I remember in my childhood in the 70s that such wooden vessels, we were able to meet them. This is talking about the date, and then dendrochronological analysis, it will confirm it, or it won't confirm it. Yeah. From the point of view of the restoration, I would like to comment, we are unwilling for restoration to museification of such objects. A very difficult, very long work, requiring financing, preparing of technical and then the initial research. And of course here have questions how they want to museify it, and we need to have the correct approach in regards to it. Yesterday it was mentioned that if there is a situation that we need to preserve something, let's get prepared to that in the correct manner. The conference is dedicated here to the museum restoration of the wooden finds. We maintain the dimensions, maintain the form, all the surface marks, and how we need to do it methodologically correct. Many issues arise. We all do hope that the centers will appear on the correct restoration, ethical restoration, and the complete approach. So I see for now the possibilities to study of the archaeology that it was studied, because So, we have to stick to the principles of the museum restoration. One of them is do not harm. So yesterday we have touched on the topic when such objects appear. We need to create a working group out of the specialists so that it is done collectively and discussed collectively. Certain recommendations are provided because we have cases like that. Yes, Natalia, you're absolutely right, and this question was raised, and I have taken part in a conference in the Sevastopol by the Ministry of Culture of Russian Federation. It was organized, and over there was a question on the need of the publication on the methodological materials on conservation of items from the wet layer and from the wood as well, because there's big finds like that, and I have taken part in July in Archangelsk on the north, and there was interesting reports on findings of the vessels in the northern Dvina, aged 17th, 18th century. It is clear the wish of those people to extract it, to museify it, to preserve it, but really it is difficult. And such conference as ours, I do hope that it will become popular among the specialists who deal with those questions in order to distribute the knowledge on methods of conservation and preservation of wood, and getting to know that, understanding that it's not a simple thing and it requires loads of financial preparation and having certain knowledge. And as you have noted, in order not to harm to our units, maybe in the resolution of our conference, Natalia has said that the final document we will create with the participants of our conference, and as one of the points was the creation of the working group with the methodological examples for the users in our country, and as a whole to create the working group who would deal in those matters. And on the basis of the Ministry of Culture of Russian Federation, we have the working group. So maybe now there is a need to create the working group on the wet archaeology. In any case, within ICOM, we're going to continue with this work, and jointly with our colleagues from the International Working Group on the wet materials. And that is the proposal. And I would like to say that to Olga Makarova, you can send your proposals to include it into the resolution, of our conference. Certain proposals, we will finalize it within the month, and we will provide it to all of the parties' interest. We are really expecting the assistance from our foreign colleagues. They can work with big, large-scale objects, and they give good results, especially Dutch colleagues of ours, very good results. And over time, they are museified greatly, and there are exhibitions that are organized. So the second life of the Viking, like he travels around the world, and this is great. And some structures we can do it in such ways. So we do hope that our colleagues from the group will support us in full and will provide us with methodological recommendations to maintain our shipwrecks and certain, like large-scale items that we find. This is it. Thank you. Well, that was the final word, the final report of our conference that we saw. I mean, the video. And our conference is coming to an end. I hope that these 2 days were very interesting, and I would like to say that, and everybody knows, I guess, that in the last year, in Kazan, in September, there will be a 3-year conference of the working group on the wet archaeological materials of the International Scientific Committee of ICOMCC on the conservation of wood, and we invite you to take part in the proceedings of that conference. The information of that is located, it's in the internet, and there are references, there are web links on the website. Natalia and myself, we have participated in those conferences, really large-scale events, and some people being present here from Kazan, they have taken part in that big event, very filled with a true working program, and those that are in charge of those issues or are interested in those issues, please take part in the conference as the observer or as the speaker. I would like to thank everyone for the interest, for your interesting reports, outstanding reports, and that you're not afraid to sharing with your problems. We need to resolve the problems. Consequently, we need to talk about them. And yesterday it was said we can make mistakes, but let's avoid them, like really. And I wish to everyone health, good mood, and all and utmost successes in all of the aspects of your life, including the professional one. And thank you so much, greatly. Thank you. Now we have lunch, and then now there's official photo. Then we go to lunch.